That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member who's not with us right now. But the rest of the committee members, I appreciate you for having this hearing today and for letting us bring forward the H.R. 1633, the Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act of 2011. I introduced this common sense bill on April 15th of this year with my colleagues, Representative Robert Hurt, Larry Kizel, and Leonard Boswell, because of the regulatory uncertainty that's facing rural America. We certainly have challenges in front of us. My bill is a bipartisan approach to ending the EPA's regulation of farm dust in rural America while still maintaining the protections of the Clean Air Act to the public's health and welfare. It's not a Republican and it's not a Democrat issue. There's broad bipartisan support with over 100 colleagues on both sides of the aisle sponsoring this bill. And the committee will see in the record that there's also over 100 agriculture and resource-based organizations who have written in support of the bill as well. As this committee knows, there's growing concern that excess regulations are hampering economic growth and job creation across the country. In my home state of South Dakota, there's a huge concern for farmers and for ranchers and small business owners who are struggling to stay afloat in an already stressed economy. One of the most overwhelming concerns that I hear from farmers every day and ranchers back home is the overbearing regulations coming out of the EPA, including the regulation of farm dust. Their concern is certainly not unwarranted. Under the Clean Air Act, the EPA is responsible for setting the national ambient air quality standards for certain pollutants. This includes particulate matter, which is broken down into fine and coarse particulate matter, commonly known as dust. The administrator of the EPA, Lisa Jackson, must set the national ambient air quality standards that states must be designated either as in non-attainment areas. The goal of these standards is to protect the public from harmful pollutants like industrial soot, car emissions common in urban areas, which I certainly support. The EPA measures the amount of particulate matter or dust in the air through monitoring devices that are placed throughout the country. At least every 5 years, the administrator must review those standards, decide if they want to keep the current standard or potentially adopt a more stringent standard. As this committee is aware, the EPA is currently in the process and in the midst of another review. Under current law, the EPA standards include all kinds of dust, including dust generated from ag activities and the dust that's typical in rural America. This type of dust is naturally occurring and includes soil, wind-blown dust, or dust that comes off of dirt roads. I call it farm dust. This is completely different than the type of dust typical in urban areas, which has been shown to have adverse health effects. My legislation specifically focuses on rural dust. It allows the standard to apply unchanged in urban areas. Farm dust is a fact of life in rural America, and unlike urban dust, has not been shown to have a significant health concern. Including farm dust in the National Ambient Air Quality Standard regulations causes great concern and uncertainty for farmers and other resource-based industries in rural America. I'd like to clear up the myth that the EPA does currently not regulate dust. Farmers and ranchers are already subject to the standard for dust in non-attainment areas like Arizona. There are people in Arizona that certainly know the impact that this has on businesses. It can cost some producers in that state over $1,000 a day to comply with dust standards. On September 17, 2011, a Des Moines Register story tells the story of Kevin Rogers, who's going to testify here later today and tell his personal story. He's a farmer from outside of Phoenix, Arizona, that if the wind is blowing too much, he has to park his tractors. He has to park his combines so that he doesn't kick up too much dust. As a lifelong farmer and rancher myself, I certainly understand the impact that this can have when you have a job to get done and you have a business to run. And as Kevin puts it, it's a difficult thing when the government is in the middle of every single thing that we're doing. We need to put an end to regulation of farm dust and prevent its expansion into the future. Regulation of farm dust is a problem today and will be more of an issue if the EPA continues to have opportunities to make more stringent standards into the future. The inclusion of farm dust in the EPA's national ambient air quality standards will continue to be a problem until legislation is enacted to ensure that farm dust is treated differently. EPA is well aware that it cannot, under current law, differentiate between dust coming from rural areas or urban areas. And while officials in the EPA continue to say that they have no intention of regulating farm dust, the EPA does regulate farm dust and has no plan to exempt naturally occurring farm dust from their regulations. This bill certainly provides a solution. It gives us the ability to differentiate between natural occurring rural dust and that is typically occurring in urban areas. And also, what it does is it provides immediate relief for farmers in rural areas by preventing any changes to the current standards for 1 year. Secondly, it provides flexibility for states, localities, and tribes to regulate farm dust and nuisance dust themselves. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today, and I'll certainly stick around and answer any questions that the committee